Welcome everyone to the Absolute Advantage podcast.
Here we are.
La la la. So excited that you're joining us. We're super excited to be talking about the topic we are talking about today.
Yeah,
so
it's a good one.
It's one that you don't think a lot about, and definitely maybe not in the way that we're going to be talking about it today.
Yeah.
So we're talking about the topic of energy.
Mm-hmm.
And not just energy. Immediately when people often think about energy, they think immediately of their body.
Right.
And then they immediately think about exercising. And we'll touch on exercise a little bit today, but what we're talking about too is your mental energy, your emotional energy, and your physical energy. So those three things kind of comprising your energy.
Yeah.
And, understanding that we're all leaders. So whether you're leading people or not, this is about self-leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that you manage your energy and how you show up in the world, if you can get intentional about your energy, your ability to influence, your ability to just make a greater impact, to attract the right things,
Mm-hmm.
the right people, because like attracts like, right?
Yeah,
We've all been in,
absolutely.
Around people where it's like, wah,
Right,
wah,
and energy sucks.
and it's a repellent.
Yes.
Don't repel people.
Right. Seriously.
So let's chat a little bit about energy today. We want to maybe share some examples from a leadership standpoint, some personal things that the two of us do from a tactical standpoint, and just dig into this a little bit further. So, April, what are some of the things that you do to help you manage your energy?
Well, for me, it is, I'm all about just showing up as the best version of myself. And I feel like the energy you put out is the energy you're going to get back.
Yep.
And so, if you walk into a room with the right kind of positive energy and vibe, and, it tends to, people tend to pick up on that, and they start to kind of, even if they're a miserable person, it's really hard to stay miserable if you're around somebody who's being super positive and bringing a high energy to the situation. So I always try to do that. The other thing, I think, the second thing that is important to keep in mind is recognizing in yourself when you have that ability to show up as the best version of yourself, because there are times that if it's 4 o'clock in the afternoon or 5 o'clock in the afternoon, my energy is going to be different than it is at 8 o'clock in the morning.
Right.
And so there's different situations that I'm going to be able to respond and show up with the energy that I want to show up with, depending on the time of day. And so I think, setting yourself up for success, and if you've got the ability as a leader to kind of schedule, your day, map out your weeks, map out your months to optimize, your, what's the word I'm looking for? Just optimize your schedule so that you put those elements, in alignment with when your energy is going to be the type of energy that needs to be brought to that situation.
So for example,
Yeah.
So like you said, you're better in the morning,
Mm-hmm.
like 8 o'clock, your energy is going to be different than 4. So
Yeah.
how would you then organize your morning knowing that that's the best energy time of day for you? What type of things would you do in the morning?
Everything. No.
We do nothing in the afternoon.
Yeah, we just
stop working at noon.
Done. Anything that where I need to be creative.
Mm-hmm.
Anything that where I need to think out of the box. I think difficult conversations, meetings that require any kind of input.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm in a situation like later in the day, if it's a meeting where I just need to kind of, absorb, but I'm not having to, provide a lot of insight,
Mm-hmm.
then that would be the time that I'd schedule that for. Decision making towards the end of the day is not the best plan. So, I think, just ask my husband, when it comes to making a decision for dinner at the end of the day, it's like, nope, done. Yeah. So, I think that those would be some of the things that I would make sure, or that I do make sure to do.
I love that. There's one thing that you mentioned earlier that I want to circle back on, which is the energy you bring into the room and how that, kind of perpetuates itself. So look at it too from the reverse side of that. we are responsible for our energy, which means that if you've got somebody coming at you with energy, that because let's just think right now about what's happening politically.
Yeah.
You know, in the world at the time that we've recorded this, you know, Kobe Bryant just died tragically.
Yeah.
We have so many things coming at us that are heartbreaking or maddening, or some difficult conversations with family members that are maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum from a political standpoint that get divisive.
Right.
You know, so you've got this negative energy, and you can either absorb it, and become that, you know, just. And it's hard.
It's
hard to manage that.
I can think of a ton of instances where I have, and you know, without even giving examples, you can probably pick up on some of these things, and where you've been witness to, where like you go to that place.
Yep.
It's really hard to not get sucked in, and you know, and match that same, you know, whether it's negativity, whether it's just, you know, low energy, whether it's you know, anger. I mean, whatever the situation is, it's really hard to like get yourself in check in the moment and just recognize like, hey, this isn't the best time for us to be having this conversation.
Right.
Or, you know, so I think, it's difficult to do. It really takes practice.
It really does take practice. And there's something I want to say that was really meaningful to me that somebody said to me at one point. That just sticks with me, which is, and so we'll use the emotion of anger as an example.
Yeah.
So, you know, anger is an emotion. And for those first 5 minutes, it's an emotion. You can feel that. You can be angry about whatever it is you're angry about. But after 5 minutes, it's a decision.
Yeah.
You know, so,
right.
You know, I think that recognizing, you know, again, this means that you frame your day with intention around energy. So you're paying attention to it. So when you feel yourself that getting into that space where it's like, you know, I'm not liking how I'm showing up, or my thoughts are negative right now. What's happening? Like, once you get this on your radar and you start paying attention to it, and take control of it and really be responsible for your energy, your world does begin to shift. It really does.
So true.
You know, but I wanted to bring that up because it's you know, you can show up and everything with the best of intentions, and that can, you know, spread, but we do have so many influences happening.
Yeah, if you allow yourself to go to that place. And I think about myself, like some natural tendencies that I have, and again, you know this to be true. Like, I enjoy a good debate. And it is my mission in life. If I'm not in alignment with somebody's, you know, well, not my mission in life, like that's extreme, but I can go to that place really quickly where it's important for me to like get them, you know, in the same
change their mind.
Exactly. Yep. So, you know, it's easy for me to, even if it's just their attitude that they're bringing, like it's easy for me to like grab onto that and try to fix it in that moment. And a lot of times that's not the best time to do it.
Right. Exactly. So I think that's smart too. It's just knowing when, like, read the room, people.
Right. I'm like, listen to me.
So thinking about your energy a little bit differently. So a couple of tactics that I use, you know, we talk a lot in the work we do, the clients we work with our team here, about our high performance planners. And literally when I'm planning my day out and I'm looking at what I have on my schedule, I'm thinking about what energy I want to bring into that. So if we've got a team meeting and we're, you know, doing this kickoff, or we're, you know, whatever the case is, it's a team meeting, I'm thinking about, okay, what's my intention? What kind of influence do I want to have going into this meeting? You know, what's the outcome I'm hoping for? You know, so I'm really thinking about the energy, and then what's going to be the type of energy I bring into the room, what's going to get that outcome. You know, if it's a client meeting, same thing, you know, what I'm thinking about these things.
And it's all back to that intention.
It really is.
You know, what things are going to trip me up today. You know, so what do I know is on my agenda that is going to be a really difficult situation to navigate, that could draw out the kind of energy that I don't want to show up with.
You know, it's interesting you should say that. So just the other day, I had a prospect meeting that, and I've been doing this for a really long time.
Really long time.
And I built up a little bit of, it was a space that I'm not as familiar with.
Yeah.
And so I was a little uncertain. I'm in most scenarios with our business, I'm used to walking to the room and I know.
Not even a second thought
not
about
even a
what
second
you're going to
thought.
say or how you're going to say it.
Yeah. So I was like, okay. So I had some, not anxiety, I had a little fear around like, okay, so. And so I literally thought of the different scenarios that might throw me off. Like, these individuals were kind of in a, again, a different field. My expertise isn't in that field. I said, what would be the worst case scenario? Worst case scenario is I sit down in front of these people and they're assholes.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like, okay, well, how am I going to deal with that? If I get a kind of energy that I don't, appreciate,
Yep.
Or that, isn't conducive to having a constructive meeting, how am I going to handle that? Because I kind of got some different vibes throughout some different conversations and was a little bit concerned about that. But, so I prepared for that, and I knew what I was going to say if that kind of a scenario came up, which then took away the anxiety of that. And then some of the other things too, like, we're in a wonderful and unique position where we don't have to work with anybody we don't want to work with. So it's like, I don't have anything to lose. What am I worried about? So it was that same thing, kind of that thinking about that meeting. Okay, what could go wrong? What if, and then by doing that, I took away all of the anxiety around it. I had kind of thought in my head, if this scenario comes up, what I was going to say.
Right.
And then guess what? The meeting went friggin' awesome.
Yeah.
And none of that came to be, and it was a really positive meeting, and I learned a ton, and it was great.
That's a perfect, I would add one more layer to that because, I think it's super important to walk into those kind of situations with intention and a plan and having some thought going into that of how you're going to, how you might get tripped up and, how you're going to handle those situations. But don't get consumed by that because it's really easy from an energy standpoint to have that, to put so much energy into the what ifs.
Yeah.
And the kind of the doomsday or and then it starts to grow.
Mushroom.
It does.
Yeah.
And then it can be all consuming, and then chances are you're going to still go into that meeting probably not showing up as the best version of yourself,
right?
Number one, but you're probably going to show up in that meeting and everything's going to be fine, and you wasted how much time, getting consumed by that what if scenario, that that it just is a time waste.
Totally. So, use that technique, think of a couple scenarios or two, how you respond, but the other layer too is I visualize the meeting going really well.
Yeah.
I visualize literally sitting down, I'll have an idea of who's going to be in the room and everything, and sitting down, around that table and, laughing and it going well and being confident and, I visualize that in my mind too, so that's another, layer to it. So you want to expect that things are going to go right, but some of what helps you control that energy is when you do plan for, okay, what if it doesn't go right, so that I've got the fortitude, to, in that moment, because how we've done this before, when you've had a meeting, you've had a conversation with someone, something was said that was a trigger for you in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
You leave and you're like, oh, I wish I would have said this. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Or I wish I would have responded this way to it. And we can't forecast the way conversations are going to go or how people are going to respond to you. But sometimes if you just stop, have a little bit of intention around it, and do a little bit of anticipating of maybe which way this, some different ways that this could go, more so in the moment, and then that present moment you're in, you'll be able to respond better than maybe had you not thought about it going a different way.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that I do, is really look at my calendar and then kind of think about my energy as it relates to each thing on my calendar. And then throughout the day, one of the things that's really helped me is when I move from one activity to the next.
Mm-hmm.
So one meeting, like maybe it's a team meeting, and then the next meeting I have is a client meeting, or when we came in here to shoot this.
Yeah.
You know, and then I know what I've got to move to next or what I just came from. I do a quick little reset.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So even if it's just I'm taking, you know, some deep breaths, I am making a couple of notes to close out what just happened, to kind of come so I can get that out of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You know, whether it's shaking energy off, whether it's, but I put some intention around closing out what I just did in my mind,
Yeah.
so that I'm not still carrying that with me. I'm not thinking about what's next. I'm really focused on bringing that energy into that particular next thing that I'm going to.
Uh-huh.
So that's a nice way to kind of reset things too, whether it's just to close your eyes, you know, for, a minute or two while you're sitting there and do a little bit of breathing. Because one thing that saps energy
Mm-hmm.
is, so let's say you're working on a project, and I know we do a lot of, writing and creative work, and you kind of get into your groove and flow, and you're sitting in front of your laptop, and your posture moves like this,
Mm-hmm.
and you're really focused on what you're doing, and your breathing gets really shallow, and your brain isn't getting the oxygen that it needs
Right.
to, which then all of a sudden, the longer you sit,
Mm-hmm.
the more your mind maybe even starts to wander,
Right.
or just the less energy you have. You're exhausted by the end of the day.
Yep.
So doing those little resets, you know,
So important.
posture. How many times have you been sitting at your desk, breathing shallow, and you take that big deep breath in, you're like, oh,
I probably wasn't breathing for the last 10 minutes.
exactly. I'm like, oh, that feels really good. I should probably do that more often.
Yeah.
Yeah, so really simple stuff that we don't think about.
That's so true.
Yeah.
What about, we could go a couple different directions, I think, from here, like more the connected to the physiology piece, which, we're just talking about. But one thing is, as you were talking, that came to mind that I think is important to remember, and it's something that I know that we work on a lot, maybe not super successfully, but, I think about those situations where, let's just say it's an employee who you're having some challenges with. And, we have a conversation about it, and, and maybe through that conversation, some frustration builds, or we kind of fuel the situation a little bit more. It gets bigger than it necessarily needs to be. We jump to some conclusions that might not necessarily be reality.
Yeah.
But things can have a tendency to grow, and I think that happens in relationships. So you get a couple of friends together, and they're talking about, another friend, and all of a sudden it's this pig pile situation, and so just the way that negative energy can kind of build and grow in those kind of situations, I think we really need to be careful about. And we talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
We have a tendency to we are each other's sounding board. We vent. And then those venting sessions can turn into, to just something that probably it doesn't need to be, but it's, it's kind of cathartic in the moment. So,
yeah, but I think, being careful, about those kinds of conversations. And it's funny too, one of the things that we find ourselves doing a lot, and I think there is a benefit to this, as long as it doesn't go on for too long, is that kind of negative, the alternate perspective.
Yeah.
I could totally see where you're coming from, but have you thought about this?
Yeah.
So that, we have the luxury of having that with the partnership that we have,
right,
which helps a lot, but then we can also get into those situations where, it just picks up energy.
You have to make sure that when you're doing that, you're in a safe kind of dynamic, because you can do that with the wrong person, and then, things go sideways really fast.
Completely. And I think one of the things that we've really began to focus on over the course of, probably the last year is that, spend 10% of the time on the problem, not 20, like some say, literally 10%. What's the issue?
Yeah.
What's the problem? And then 90% on the solution. And if you're working on solutions, you're future focused, you're in that problem solving mode, that's a positive and energizing discussion versus when you're talking about the problem, it can just like
sit in it, like
and energize you. So I think that if you can use that tactic for yourself, sometimes it's like, okay, let's stop. We've spent too much time on the problem. Let's get to work on the solution now. I think we're all on the same page here of what the problem is. Let's keep moving. So it's, again, having an intention and an awareness around that. And sometimes in my high performance planner, one of the questions that it asks is around what could trip you up today, just in general. And that is on there at least once a week, is a conversation that is circling the drain. So what am I then going to do if I get into a situation, like when I'm looking at my calendar and I'm looking at the different meetings I have, and maybe I know we're having one about, a performance issue with an employee.
Right.
I'll put that down there to remind myself that, like, okay, let's make sure we just, talk about this, and then let's talk about the solution so we don't circle the drain and go to that place. Because it's easy to do.
It's easy
It's
to
just
do.
human nature.
Right.
Yep. So
yep. I think that's a natural tendency.
Yeah. And I think from an energy standpoint too, there are the things that, we talk about this. We've talked about it before in the past, but I would be remiss if I didn't mention it, because it's really truly is the foundation and kind of the bedrock for everything that we do, right? You taking care of yourself. If you aren't taking care of yourself from a health standpoint, then nothing else matters.
Right.
If you're not the best version of yourself from a health standpoint, how on earth can you expect to show up, be in a good mood? If you feel like shit, how do you think you're going to treat the other people around you? It's going to be really hard to keep your energy in a positive place when you don't feel well.
Yeah.
When you're bogged down, when you're not eating right, your stomach, when you don't feel good about yourself.
Yeah.
When you, it's really hard to do all of the things that April and I have just talked about if you're not taking care of yourself physically, because it absolutely translates to your behavior. So for us, the physical activity and exercise really, for me, was the catalyst for everything else, and in terms of the way I show up in the world, accomplishing the things I've accomplished, being resilient enough to make it through the things that were failures.
Yeah.
To that if I didn't have that strong foundation of physical activity and exercise, then I don't know where I would be today, actually.
Absolutely. I think too, to that point, I think you can be doing all the right things from a health standpoint, and exercise and fueling your body in the right ways. But then it's really amazing, isn't it, if just one day, like your routine gets tripped up. So I think that when you're doing the right things pretty consistently, it's much easier to see what an impact it has when you just, like, your one day something goes sideways. Like you can't, you don't, your schedule's different, so you don't work out in the morning, or you don't do your meditation, or you don't do your planning, you don't set your intention for the day, or, all of those things that are so important and really set you up for success consistently. If you don't do it one day, and like, just again, the contrast of seeing that is, it's pretty interesting. And, I know that I've seen that personally. We've talked about this before. When I broke my ankle.
I was just going to ask you about that. I was going to say, talk a little bit about because that really impacted your mental and your emotional energy.
Right.
Because when that happened, because it threw everything off. So talk a little bit about that.
Well, I think an injury, just in general, throws you off. You're not feeling as strong as you normally do. Your day, everything looks different because you're having to make accommodations. So anytime, you're not in your groove or kind of in your rhythm, I think that is really difficult anyway. But I was used to my routine, getting up in the morning, getting on the treadmill, doing my workout, and with a broken ankle, things changed.
Yeah.
So I had to find other ways, and my new norm in terms of my morning and how I was going to start off with setting my day up for success. And so that came to more sedentary things like either reading or meditating, but that there was a transition period where I sat in that place for a couple of weeks going, now what?
Yeah.
Now what do I do? And maybe not even necessarily saying that consciously, but in hindsight, looking back at it, that's what was happening.
Yeah.
And I wasn't showing up as the person I wanted to be. So
No.
you
were very really emotional.
Totally.
You were very because we'll talk just very, very briefly about the brain. I know many of you know this, but what happens in the brain when you exercise, and how that helps, with stress. With just having resilience, managing you mentioned it earlier. You said when you were working, when you broke your ankle, you didn't feel strong.
Yeah.
And there is a strong mind-body connection between working out and feeling strong physically, and it translating to feeling strong mentally.
Yep. Absolutely.
So I think that's such a great, and then just trying to figure out, okay, well, what is this going to look like, and how am I going to? So I love that, and I think one thing I want to make sure that everybody is hearing right now is the power of having an intentional morning routine that sets you up for success for your day. And it doesn't matter. It can be a combination of things. This is really, really unique and individual, and takes some testing for you to figure out what works best for you and continue tweaking, adding new little elements in. But it's so important that you just don't go through your day, without setting yourself up like that. That feather. I think of Forrest Gump and that feather, and just kind of like flittering through the air, and letting other people control your agenda and your energy. And it's your job. We are responsible for our energy, and so making sure you're setting yourself up at the beginning of your day to do it. And again, it's unique to everybody.
It is. And what's so frustrating too is I think that, and a lot of the people that from a leadership standpoint that we, work closely with, and that, we have the ability to lead and influence, and but so many people in our life don't know what they're missing.
Yeah.
That, because they haven't seen that contrast of getting into that good habit loop, and then, the results that come from that. And then, seeing what happens for a split second if you're not doing that, so that it's like, oh gosh, now you realize how important it is. But if they've never discovered that for themselves, like setting their day up for success, and and the healthy habits that help to do that, it's like, come on, please. Like, if you would just do this, like, your life will change.
It really will.
And they don't, it's like, please help us help you.
Do you feel like part of that comes from, because it's been I've been on this journey for a while.
Yeah.
So does it come from a place too of just not knowing, or of maybe it just seems so far, like it's overwhelming, or from where they're at to the other side, it seems like too much? Like, why is it that you think that?
Yeah, I think part of it's age, part of it's wisdom, part of it's hard knocks.
So what are you saying right now?
Right? We've learned the hard way.
This isn't our first rodeo.
But it is though. It's the hard knocks. It's figuring out a way to navigate some of those difficult situations. I think that it's as you get older, you start to recognize some things about yourself and realize, you just start to make some connections that I think that are difficult to make earlier in life. And here we are.
Here we are, super wise. No, but I think too, I think that having the wisdom and just age regardless of being able to identify, like, this isn't working for me. If your life isn't where you want it to be, if your teams aren't where you want them to be, if you're that it's having radical accountability for
getting sick and tired of being sick and tired.
Exactly.
It's kind of that same situation. But you're at that place in life where it's like a breaking point. You recognize it and you're like, something's got to change.
Exactly. One other thing too, how much do you think that some of this too is about, what angle do I want to take with this? About, again, it's having that awareness around the fact that you're not happy. You know, we're so, we do so much to avoid our feelings now, whether it's between streaming, whether it's between, social media, playing games, drinking, overeating, whatever the case is. We numb ourselves or anesthetize ourselves to the feeling of overwhelm and use these different things to avoid, and we really aren't checking in with ourselves to recognize that this isn't working.
Yeah.
You know,
avoidance is like it's human instinct. You know, that the instinct to just avoid pain or to recognize, like to acknowledge those kind of situations is, it's natural.
Yeah.
So
your brain wants to protect you. Our brain's that 90% there that lives in the unconscious. Because if you're not avoiding it and you are addressing it, well then by addressing it, that's going to cause initially some discomfort because you're going to have to change habits. You're going to have to maybe make some decisions about, who knows what's happening, whether it's a toxic relationship you're in. Okay, well that means everything is going to have to change, and this is going to be,
easier to numb or avoid.
Exactly. So so this is such a fun, topic to talk about, but to really be thinking about this maybe differently than you have before, and creating more of an awareness as you move through the days after you hear this. Do a little bit of experimenting to see what happens when when I pay attention to this and I walk into a meeting, or I shift my energy from where it normally is, or even just paying attention to what your energy is.
Yeah.
Like I notice at a certain time of the day my energy dips, or these types of situations are really stressful for me, and then they set me off on a pattern for the rest of the day.
Yeah.
So just creating an awareness around it for yourself, and then one step beyond that, create that awareness, start showing up differently from an energetic standpoint, and then see what comes as a result of doing that. Because your body too, that brain just needs a little bit of like positive feedback, like, oh, I get this now.
Yep.
And then, it'll just be that much easier to start to kind of create some new, habit, and pathways in your brain that are positive around this.
I think it's important just to there's so many different things that you can do, but I think that starting small and just taking the time to sit and in quiet, to reflect, and then to set intention, whatever that is, just one thing. Pick one thing that you're going to kind of switch and test and try and see if that's something that makes a difference for you.
Yeah, I think, let me ask you a question and then I'll answer it too.
Okay.
So if there were one thing, for you to start with, so you and this goes back to what you just said, which is starting small.
Right.
So what would the one thing that you would do to add, just like a small, do you have any ideas?
I do. It's hard to pick one though.
I know, it's super hard to pick one.
And it's different for everybody.
It is.
So for me, can I pick two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Go ahead. Whatever.
Maybe two, maybe three. I think.
Don't steal mine. Whatever it is. I've got one in mind right now.
Number one is setting yourself up for success from a sleep standpoint.
Yes.
So finding your rhythm, finding your pattern, finding the number of hours that really connect to your physiology and your body. And then number two is exercise.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, and at the beginning of the day for me, like if I tried to set a routine to exercise at the end of the day, it would never happen.
Nope.
It has to be first thing in the morning. And that's like, I get the optimal benefit from first thing in the morning because it just kind of sets the foundation for my day.
No, I love that. And I would say if you're in a place where like exercise, it feels like it's too far away.
Yeah.
I think sleep is a great place to start, but I think the one thing that you could start doing that doesn't take any physical activity at all, but that can really start to shift your mind and your energy is like while you're still laying in bed in the morning, before you even get out of bed, think about 3 things that you're grateful for.
Yeah. I love that.
You know what I mean? Just like while you're laying there, it's part of a practice I have every morning in my gym. After I'm done working out, I write 3 things down too, where it's just keeping you grounded, because when you're in a grateful state and when you live in that state as much as you can, it's hard to feel anything else but positive energy around that.
Yep.
You know, and that's even just for the little things. Like I woke up this morning, and again, as I mentioned, it's been a really hard week this week with what's been in the news. You know, I said with Kobe Bryant tragically, you know, passing away, and just such an amazing influence on this world and as a leader, and so it has impacted so many people, myself included, you know, and so it was just like, my gosh, you know what I mean? Like I'm laying here under these cozy covers, waking up for the day, and I get another day to go out and make a difference, an impact, to create, to work with my team, to be here sitting with you, and you know, and if you can start your day in that place where you're just really grateful, and it could be the simple things. Like one of them was Maggie, who is like my heart, my little dog. Her ears are so soft, and she comes right up. She wakes me up every morning, and I reach down and her ears, and I'm like, I love her soft ears. I'm so grateful for those. Like it doesn't have to be any like big deal, but I think the more you start doing it, the more you start recognizing the things that we take for granted.
So
you know,
true.
so
I love that.
That's a really great place to start. That just starts to prime build a new habit that's a positive one, and it doesn't take any. You just lay there and think about the great things that are, you know, if it's a roof over your head, running water, because you know. 70, I think, percent of I can't remember what the number is, of the world, like
entirely too high.
Entirely too high. They're thinking about. That's what they wake up thinking about, is how they're going to go to get water for that day, or filter their water so that they can drink it, and I get to go to the tap and turn it on, or stand under a hot shower after I work out in my home gym. It's like, come on.
Right.
You know, so come on, people. So anyway,
I love it.
We love this topic. We're so grateful that you've tuned in today, and check us out at Absolute Advantage Leadership. We've got some cool things available for you in there. We have a membership called All Access, where we dig into each of these topics even a little bit deeper. So you can check us out there too. And where else can they find us?
We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. I think those are the main ones. The main YouTube, and then our website.
Yeah.
So
wonderful. So thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Bye-bye.